Welcome to Breadcrumbs. This is the prophetic journal of a girl who's more than happy to eat the crumbs off the Master's table. If you're like me, then listen and be encouraged, that even in the whispers and mere shadows, our God still speaks, and He has a lot to say. I dreamed of a city. It had tall skyscrapers that were all laid out under a dark night sky that was strewn with stars that appeared to be far too bright and far too close. There were many people out in the streets. They were all excitedly looking up because in the sky there was a dancing nebula, a dancing star made of shifting gases of red and orange and green. A woman beside me held up her phone to get a closer look. Her phone seemed to be an advanced technology of sorts that acted as a kind of telescope. After looking at the nebula for a moment, she handed the phone to me so I could get a better look. And that's when I saw something that nobody else seemed to notice. To the right of the nebula, the sky rippled. It looked similar to when something drops into a pond and the water creates rings that ripple outward. And I began to realize that a vast ocean of water was rippling above our heads, suspended there, and the vastness of it terrified me. And that's when it began to rain. Of course, I thought of the Noah story. The way it reads in the Bible, it seems as though the Lord had created the earth in a kind of womb where there were waters above and below. And the flood judgment was the piercing of the net, so to speak, that held back the waters. And the waters poured down from above in torrents, as well as gushing up from caverns in the deep. This dream spoke of a worldwide event that is waiting to be birthed, groaning against the barriers that are holding it back, seemingly imminent in its arrival. The sense I got was not fear so much as awe. I know that feeling. It is the fear of God, and I woke up shaking. I have dreamed of floods before. Starting in about 2019, He began to speak to me about floods, about Noah, about something that would affect the entire earth. I have dreamed of standing on the only dry patch of land left on earth, with a company of people, while waves as high as the sky rolled past on every side. I have dreamed of standing on a boardwalk as the entire earth was consumed by water, and as the boardwalk sank beneath my feet, I was rescued by my family. They were floating on the water in a boat that was made up of a single room of our house, all lit up with warm light. I have dreamed of waters climbing up the streets of San Francisco. I've had a dream of watching the waters rise outside and seeing waves crash up against the window I was watching out of, and knowing the water couldn't get in, knowing it couldn't reach me, but knowing that everything outside that window had been washed away. We all need to learn awe. We all need to learn the fear of God, to learn of His vastness and our smallness. I think He teaches that to us in different ways. For me, He always uses water. Every dream and every vision and every word He's ever given me about flooding, He's also given me rainbows. Floods and rainbows, floods and rainbows. One of the most profound and impactful dreams I've had in the last few years involved a rainbow. In this dream, the entire world was wrapped in mist. It was as though the sky had come to earth, and out of the mist loomed a rainbow that made me cower in awe. It was so enormous. It was only a few feet away from me, and it was made of something solid, giving the sense that I could reach out and touch it if I wanted to. He was telling me that His promises, you can stand on them. They are so solid that they're touchable, and growing more solid and tangible by the day. It was as if He was saying, the fulfillment of those promises, when you will be able to see, taste, touch them, it's almost here. The first time I saw a rainbow encircling the sun, I heard Him say, "You are encircled by my covenant. You are hidden in my Son." Now today, I did not wake up having received a rainbow. I guess he's switching things up, because today, instead of a rainbow, he gave me a flood survival kit. And that's a quote. That's what he told me it was. Last night, he spoke of many things, and he showed me many pictures. He'd shown me 3 main images laid out as though they were in a textbook. I grew up with these eyewitness science books, and they were beautifully done. If the subject of the book was seashells, then the book would be laid out as a series of white pages with crisp, sharp, full-color, real-life images of things that pertain to shells, either the shells themselves or perhaps the creatures that feed off them, the ecosystem they live in, and each would be diagrammed with a little note about how it all fits together. Last night I saw something a lot like that. It was a blank page with a whole bunch of images, most of which I don't recall, but there are 3 that are imprinted really deeply in my spirit. The first was 3 water droplets, and I heard fresh water. The next was a man in a robe curled up like a child in a fetal position, and I heard Enoch. And the last thing was a long olive branch. It was so long that it draped across the top of the picture, almost as though it were a garland. These 3 things were what the Lord showed me was our flood survival kit. I believe they represent water, oil, and faith. The fresh water, Ezekiel 47. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be a large number of fish, because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. This passage goes on to explain that many fishermen will be fishing out the fish along the banks of that freshwater river. This passage speaks about En-Gedi, which is linked to that great catch of fish that we read about in the story of Jesus, miraculously demonstrating a huge catch of fish to Peter and his brother and the sons of Zebedee. This speaks of the flourishing of life wherever God is, of how through his people he brings life, about what I believe is the promise of a huge ingathering of people in the last days, a flourishing of souls as they fall in love with Jesus. As his people, we will walk around offering up living water to those who are going to be increasingly parched and thirsty, and many will drink of it. Enoch to me represents how God absolutely delights in his kids. I got the sense Enoch was being held lovingly in the hand of the Father. Hebrews 11:5. By faith that pleased God, Enoch was caught up and taken to heaven, so that he would not have a glimpse of death. And he was not found because God had taken him. For even before he was taken to heaven, he received the testimony that he had walked with God and pleased him. But without faith it is impossible to walk with God and please him. For whoever comes near to God must believe that God exists, and that he rewards those who earnestly and diligently seek him. There isn't much that's said about Enoch, but the sense I've always had of him is that he was so beloved. His friendship with God was so sweet, so steady, so pure, that God just wanted to scoop him home. He said, let's bypass death altogether. I just want to take you home. The name Enoch means dedicated, trained, disciplined. There's an obvious call in that. I know that many of us have been feeling like we've been put through a boot camp, that we are in fact being set aside for something, trained with intent. We're undergoing a stripping and a purging, painful discipline in order to carry out whatever specialized task he has for us. I believe we're being called to be a kind of Enoch, not just in our single-minded discipline, but also in our childlike intimacy. He's calling us to both. Finally, that olive branch, Zechariah 4 says this. The angel asked, "What do you see?" And I said, "I see a lampstand all of gold, with its bowl for oil on the top of it, and its 7 lamps on it, with 7 spouts belonging to each of the lamps, which are on the top of it. And there are 2 olive trees beside it, one on the right side of the bowl, and the other on its left side, supplying it continuously with oil." So I asked the angel who was speaking with me, "What are these, my Lord?" Then he said to me, "This continuous supply of oil is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, of whom the oil is a symbol, says the Lord of hosts. What are you, O great mountain of obstacles, before Zerubbabel, who will rebuild the temple? You will become a plain, insignificant. He will bring out the capstone of the new temple, with loud shouts of grace, grace to it." There is so much in this passage. I think the takeaway, though, is that oil does not represent might or power. It represents the Holy Spirit, of whom we need a continuous supply. And with that continuous supply, nothing is impossible. Not a great mountain of an obstacle that stands in front of us. Not a flood swirling around us. There will be grace. The other thing about that olive branch is the way it was draped across the top of the image. It brought to mind the top of the doorposts that the Israelites were told to spread blood over, so that when the angel of death passed over, they'd be safe. It acted as a kind of covering, a covering of peace. The olive branch has come to symbolize peace. And so it's as if he was saying, there is a covering of peace over my people. And I know that's true. I woke up throughout the night praying these things down upon my family, praying for the living water, praying for faith like Enoch, praying for a continuous supply of oil. He's saying something's coming, something big, that will threaten to overwhelm us. He's given us a survival kit. Right here, he names 3 of the things that we have available to keep us from being swept away, in the swirl of it, in the fear of it. The water, the oil, and Enoch-like faith. A lot of us are feeling that something is coming. Like the flood in my dream. It's hidden behind a lot of flashy distractions, like that dancing ball of light that had captured everybody's attention. But our spirits feel it. We can't name what it is exactly. It's hard to define because it will be good and bad both, judgment and blessing. But we feel it pressing down on us, as though it's suspended above our heads, straining against the net that's holding it. For many of us, we have felt the pressure of it growing and growing and growing, and it has shifted something inside of me from fear to a kind of anticipation. I want whatever is coming to come, because I know enough to know that he's got this. A friend once shared a dream she had of me where I was wearing a bright yellow rain jacket, and I was walking calmly on top of the waters of a river. Not only was I walking on the water, I was playing with a ball. It spoke such comfort over me to remember that as his kids, we are water walkers, and we are not unprepared. I had a rain jacket on. I know the waters are coming, whatever that means, whatever that's going to look like, and I'm not afraid. In fact, I'm full of a childlike joy because I know the harder things get, the more I will see his face.
Okay, so basically it was like I was at your guys' place having dinner or something, and then out the window there was like this huge rainbow, and it was kind of like glowing or like sparkling, whatever, and then it kind of like fell or like dripped down into like this tub, kind of like a bathtub. So yeah, it turned into blood into this bathtub, and it was like bright red. And like I remember it so vividly. It was like sparkling bright red and like churning and like kind of like waving. And it was just so vivid. Yeah, so after waking up, I had my prayer time, and I was just like trying to think about like what the heck the dream could mean. And then I got the word covenant, and I thought of like the Noah and the flood and stuff with the rainbow, and then Jesus fulfilling the covenant like through his death on the cross. So, oh, another thing is that like I remember like in the dream, like after seeing the rainbow turn to blood, I like turned to you and said something about like, oh, like it's just like what you saw or whatever. Even though like I haven't talked to you in like so long, that was pretty cool.
If you want to interact with any of these episodes, if the Lord has spoken to you about similar things, then I really want to hear about it. This podcast has an Instagram account over at Mildly Prophetic. I'll put that in the show notes. If you hop over there, you can share the things you've seen and heard. You can ask me questions. Basically, you can add your breadcrumbs to mine. And if we gather them all up, then what a feast it'll be.